If you think a joke can't change two lives forever, wait until you hear what happened the day a billionaire laughed at the wrong man. The afternoon sun reflected off rows of polished luxury cars outside Sinclair Motors in Charlotte, North Carolina, turning chrome into mirrors and asphalt into shimmering waves. Customers drifted between high-end vehicles while sales associates smiled with polished confidence. But at the edge of the parking lot, where the service bays smelled of warm rubber and fresh motor oil, Marcus Carter tightened the strap on his worn tool bag and wiped a streak of grease from the back of his hand. His faded work shirt carried years of honest labor, and although it had been washed countless times, the embroidered name above his pocket remained perfectly readable. Marcus. He had spent the morning replacing brake pads, diagnosing electrical faults, and answering questions from worried drivers who depended on their cars to keep their families moving. To Marcus, every repair mattered because every customer trusted him with something important. As he reached for a diagnostic scanner, the unmistakable growl of a Porsche 911 rolled into the driveway, before stopping abruptly with a sharp electronic warning chime. Heads turned almost instantly. The woman stepping out of the driver's seat looked like she had walked off the cover of a business magazine. Victoria Sinclair adjusted her sunglasses, glanced at the dashboard with visible annoyance, and crossed the pavement in tailored white slacks and a navy blazer that seemed untouched by the summer heat. Nearly everyone recognized her. She was the founder and CEO of Sinclair Dynamics, one of the fastest-growing electric transportation companies in America, and her face appeared regularly on financial news broadcasts. Employees straightened their posture as she approached, while a few customers quietly whispered her name. Marcus simply looked at the dashboard display through the windshield before calmly opening his toolbox. Victoria folded her arms and watched him for a moment, amused by his quiet confidence. "Can you fix my Porsche?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough for everyone nearby to hear. Marcus nodded politely. "I'll take a look, ma'am." She smiled with playful sarcasm, glancing toward the growing audience. "Fix my Porsche, and I'll marry you." Laughter rippled across the service lane. Several people chuckled because they assumed everyone understood it was a harmless joke. Marcus didn't laugh. He didn't look embarrassed either. Instead, he opened the hood with careful hands and let his eyes move slowly across the engine compartment. The cheerful noise around him faded into the background as his expression changed almost imperceptibly. His fingers paused over a wiring harness that didn't belong where it should have been. He leaned closer, noticing tiny scratches around a protective cover that had clearly been removed and reinstalled by someone familiar with the vehicle. His breathing slowed. His eyes narrowed. Then he looked directly at Victoria, no longer seeing a billionaire surrounded by expensive cars and expensive expectations. He saw a driver who had no idea what she was about to risk. His voice remained calm, steady, and respectful, but every word landed with unexpected weight. "Ma'am, whatever you do, please don't start this engine again." The smiles disappeared almost as quickly as they had appeared. Victoria lowered her sunglasses, studying him for the first time without amusement. Around them, the afternoon suddenly felt quieter, as though even the distant sound of traffic had stepped back to listen. Victoria Sinclair held Marcus Carter's gaze for several long seconds, searching for even the smallest hint that he might be exaggerating, but she found nothing except quiet certainty. Around them, the mechanics stopped working, customers lowered their phones, and the cheerful atmosphere dissolved into uneasy silence. Marcus did not raise his voice or make dramatic gestures. He simply reached toward the engine compartment again, carefully pointing at a section hidden beneath a factory cover. "Someone has been here recently," he said. "This part has fresh tool marks, and this connector should not be sitting at this angle." Victoria frowned. "My Porsche was serviced 3 days ago at an authorized dealership." Marcus nodded slowly. "That is exactly why this does not make sense." He closed the hood gently instead of slamming it. "Please let me inspect it before anyone starts the engine." His calm professionalism contrasted sharply with the expensive surroundings. While others saw one of the richest women in the state standing beside a luxury sports car, Marcus only saw a customer whose safety mattered. That mindset had followed him through every chapter of his life. 5 years earlier, everything had changed after his wife passed away following a long illness. Overnight, Marcus had become both father and mother to their little daughter, Ava. Every weekday began before sunrise. He prepared breakfast, packed a small lunch with handwritten notes that always ended with the same sentence. Dad loves you more than yesterday. Walked Ava to school, and then spent 10 hours solving mechanical problems that most people never noticed until they were stranded on the side of the road. After work, he helped with homework, made dinner, read bedtime stories, and repaired neighbors' lawn mowers or generators whenever extra bills appeared. His apartment was modest, but every corner reflected care instead of wealth. Family photographs filled one wall. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. A tiny bookshelf held repair manuals beside fairy tales. Marcus often reminded Ava that every machine told the truth if someone listened carefully enough. Loose bolts, worn bearings, cracked hoses, damaged wiring, every problem left clues. People were not so different. They also left clues through kindness, patience, and honesty. Those lessons had made Marcus one of the most trusted technicians in Charlotte, even if few people knew much about his life beyond the garage doors. Back at the dealership, Victoria folded her arms once more, although the confidence behind her posture had begun to soften. She noticed Marcus was not trying to impress her, negotiate a reward, or mention her earlier joke. Instead, he reached for a flashlight, crouched beside the front wheel, and quietly continued his inspection as though the crowd had disappeared. One of the service advisors stepped closer. "Miss Sinclair, we can arrange another vehicle while we finish the inspection." She almost answered automatically before stopping herself. Her attention remained fixed on Marcus. Every movement he made was deliberate. Every observation was supported by evidence instead of opinion. For reasons she could not yet explain, the confidence she usually placed in expensive credentials had begun shifting toward the quiet mechanic kneeling on the concrete, whose grease-stained hands seemed to understand her car far better than anyone else had. Victoria Sinclair slowly removed her sunglasses and slipped them into the pocket of her blazer, no longer interested in appearances. The afternoon sunlight still reflected across the polished body of the Porsche, but her attention remained fixed on Marcus Carter as he continued examining the vehicle with remarkable patience. He never rushed, never performed for the growing audience, and never once reminded anyone that he had been the first person to recognize something unusual. Instead, he reached beneath the engine compartment with a slim inspection mirror, angling it carefully until the reflection caught a narrow section hidden behind the factory shielding. His expression remained thoughtful rather than dramatic. "Someone replaced this retaining clip," he said quietly. "The original part leaves a different wear pattern. This one was installed recently." Victoria stepped closer, curiosity replacing skepticism. "How can you tell?" Marcus held the mirror toward her without touching the engine. "Factory technicians work with calibrated tools that leave consistent markings. These scratches are uneven. Whoever opened this section knew enough to get inside, but not enough to leave it looking untouched." Several employees exchanged uncertain glances. The dealership service manager approached with a tablet in his hand and reviewed the digital maintenance history. Every scheduled inspection appeared complete. Every certification was present. Everything looked perfectly normal on paper. Marcus did not criticize the records. He simply pointed to the evidence sitting inches away. Victoria found herself studying him instead of the paperwork. She had spent years surrounded by executives who spoke with confidence before gathering facts. Marcus gathered facts first and allowed the evidence to speak for him. That difference unsettled her more than she expected. Success had taught her to recognize ambition quickly. Investors wanted access. Consultants wanted contracts. Strangers often wanted photographs, introductions, or opportunities. Yet Marcus wanted none of those things. His only concern appeared to be making certain she did not drive away before the inspection was complete. The realization quietly challenged assumptions she had carried for years. "Can you show me everything?" she asked. Marcus nodded once. "Of course. I would rather you see it yourself than simply take my word for it." He carefully removed another protective panel and revealed a wiring bundle that looked ordinary at first glance. Then he pointed toward an almost invisible splice hidden beneath black insulation. "This connection is not part of the original design," he explained. "I cannot tell you why it is here until I test it, but I can tell you it does not belong." The service manager leaned forward and stared in disbelief. Even he had missed it during his initial inspection. Victoria folded her arms again, though this time not out of distance or pride. She was thinking, Every major decision she had made in business came from recognizing patterns other people overlooked. Standing inside a dealership service bay surrounded by the scent of warm metal and fresh engine oil, she experienced an unfamiliar feeling. For the first time that day, she realized the quiet mechanic in front of her was not asking anyone to believe him. He was inviting them to discover the truth alongside him. The dealership service manager immediately called for the diagnostic equipment used only during manufacturer-level inspections, and within minutes 2 senior technicians rolled a mobile analysis cart beside the Porsche. Marcus stepped back just enough to give them room, never acting as though he had won an argument. Instead, he quietly explained each observation in the same measured tone he would have used for an aging family sedan. One technician connected the factory scanner while another removed the protective cover Marcus had identified. The computer displayed no active faults. Every electronic system reported normal operation. A few employees exchanged relieved smiles, believing the concern had been settled. Marcus remained silent. He had learned years ago that machines could hide problems until someone asked the right questions. Run a live circuit analysis instead of the standard diagnostic, he suggested politely. The senior technician hesitated before nodding. Good idea. The test began again. Numbers scrolled across the monitor. Green indicators suddenly shifted to yellow. Then one sensor produced a reading that made the technician lean closer to the screen. That cannot be right, he whispered. He disconnected the scanner, repeated the procedure, and received the exact same result. Victoria watched every movement without speaking. The confidence she normally carried into every board meeting had been replaced by careful attention. The technician removed another panel beneath the engine compartment, revealing a hidden control module secured with hardware that did not match the original factory installation. This was added after production, he said quietly. It is definitely not part of Porsche's design. Marcus crouched beside him and pointed toward a thin bundle of wires disappearing behind the firewall. Follow those. The technician traced them carefully until he uncovered a compact electronic device no larger than a deck of playing cards. No manufacturer label appeared anywhere on its surface. Only a serial number had been partially filed away. The service lane fell completely silent. Even customers standing several yards away sensed something serious had been uncovered. Victoria stared at the unfamiliar component. What exactly is it? She asked. Marcus answered honestly. I do not know yet. But I do know someone wanted it hidden. The dealership manager immediately contacted the regional technical support office, while photographs were taken from multiple angles. Every image confirmed the same conclusion. The device had been intentionally concealed inside the vehicle. No one present could explain why. Victoria slowly exhaled and looked toward Marcus. You could have ignored this, she said. You could have simply repaired whatever warning light appeared and sent me on my way. Marcus gave a small shrug. That would have been easier, but it would not have been right. Those words lingered in the warm afternoon air longer than anyone expected. Victoria realized she had spent years measuring people by resumes, titles, and accomplishments, yet the man standing before her measured success by responsibility. Before anyone could say another word, the dealership receptionist hurried across the showroom carrying a cordless phone. Her face had turned noticeably pale. Miss Sinclair, she said carefully. Your executive office is on the line. They said it is urgent. They asked if your Porsche is still there because someone just reported suspicious activity involving your vehicle this morning. Every eye turned toward the sports car once again, but this time nobody saw an expensive automobile. They saw a mystery that had only begun to reveal itself. Victoria accepted the phone from the receptionist without taking her eyes off the Porsche. This is Victoria. The voice on the other end belonged to her chief of security. It was calm, but unusually tense. Where are you right now? At Sinclair Motors. A brief pause followed. Good. Stay there. Do not leave until we arrive. Victoria frowned. What happened? One of our analysts reviewed security footage from your corporate garage this morning. An unidentified individual entered the restricted parking level wearing a contractor uniform that does not match any approved vendor. The person spent less than 4 minutes near your vehicle before disappearing through a service exit. We were verifying the footage before contacting you. Victoria slowly lowered the phone. Around her, the afternoon felt strangely still. The laughter that had filled the service lane less than 30 minutes earlier had been replaced by quiet conversations and concerned expressions. Marcus looked toward the security phone resting in her hand, then back at the exposed wiring beneath the Porsche. He did not ask what had been said. He simply continued examining the unfamiliar module with the same careful attention that had brought everyone to this moment. Within 15 minutes, two black sport utility vehicles entered the dealership parking lot. Several members of Victoria's executive security team stepped out wearing business attire instead of uniforms. Their leader introduced himself to the dealership manager before carefully photographing the concealed electronic device. One of the investigators crouched beside Marcus. "You were the first person to notice this?" Marcus nodded. "Only because something looked different from the factory assembly." The investigator studied him for a moment. "Do you have experience with electronic systems?" Marcus answered honestly. "Mostly automotive diagnostics. Years ago, I repaired specialized equipment during military service, but today I fix family vehicles." The investigator exchanged a quick glance with another member of the team before returning his attention to the hidden component. "That explains why you noticed details most people would overlook." Victoria quietly listened to every word. Earlier that afternoon, she had assumed Marcus was simply another talented mechanic. Now she realized there was much more behind his calm confidence. Yet Marcus showed no interest in discussing his past. He remained focused on making certain the vehicle stayed exactly where it was until specialists completed their inspection. One of the dealership employees approached him carrying a bottle of cold water. "You have been standing here for almost 2 hours, the employee said. "You should probably take a break." Marcus smiled gratefully. "Thank you." Before opening the bottle, he glanced at the clock mounted above the service bay entrance. His expression changed for the first time that day. He reached into his pocket and checked his phone. The screen displayed a photograph of a smiling little girl holding a homemade science project. The time underneath the picture made his shoulders sink slightly. Victoria noticed the change immediately. "Is everything all right?" Marcus looked almost embarrassed. "I promised my daughter I would pick her up from her after-school program before 5. She worries if I am late." Without another thought, Victoria answered, "Go. We can handle everything here." Marcus shook his head gently. "Not until I know this investigation is finished." The investigator looked up from the engine compartment. "Mr. Carter, thanks to you, we already have the evidence we need. Your daughter is waiting. I think you have earned the right to keep your promise." For the first time that afternoon, Victoria saw something more valuable than technical skill. She saw a father whose greatest priority was never the billionaire standing beside him or the mystery hidden beneath the Porsche. It was the little girl waiting for him to come home. Marcus thanked the investigator, gathered his weathered tool bag, and climbed into his aging pickup truck just as the first golden colors of early evening settled across Charlotte. The steady hum of traffic replaced the tension of the dealership, and for the first time all afternoon, he allowed himself to breathe. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of Ava's after-school program. The moment she spotted his truck through the front window, her face lit up with the unmistakable smile that had carried him through the hardest years of his life. She hurried outside with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, holding a paper covered in bright construction paper stars. "Dad, I knew you would come," she said as she climbed into the passenger seat. Marcus smiled warmly. "I told you I would." She proudly handed him the project she had made during art class. Across the top, written in careful second-grade handwriting, were the words, "My hero fixes everything." Marcus laughed softly and felt his eyes linger on the colorful page longer than he expected. "I do not fix everything," he said gently. Ava shook her head with complete confidence. "You always try. That is why you are my hero." As they drove home, they stopped at a neighborhood grocery store to pick up bread, milk, and tomato soup because Ava had requested grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. Their apartment complex was quiet, filled with bicycles leaning against porches and children drawing colorful chalk pictures across the sidewalks. Inside their small apartment, the evening followed its familiar rhythm. Marcus washed the dishes while Ava described every detail of her school day. She proudly explained how she had helped a classmate solve a math problem instead of finishing her own worksheet first. Marcus smiled. "Your mom would have been proud of that." After dinner, Ava completed her homework at the kitchen table, while Marcus quietly repaired the loose hinge on one of her bookshelves. The gentle tapping of his screwdriver echoed through the apartment alongside soft music playing from an old radio. Everything felt ordinary again. Yet several miles away, Inside the top-floor conference room of Sinclair Dynamics headquarters, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Victoria sat alone before a large monitor displaying photographs of the concealed electronic device recovered from her Porsche. Security specialists, engineers, and legal advisors had already confirmed one important fact. The component had never been manufactured by Porsche or approved by any certified supplier. It had been deliberately installed by someone with advanced technical knowledge. Victoria leaned back in her chair and stared through the glass walls overlooking the city skyline. She thought about the laughter at the dealership earlier that afternoon. She thought about the joke she had made without considering the man standing in front of her. Most of all, she thought about Marcus leaving everything behind simply to keep a promise to his daughter. For years, she had measured success by quarterly reports, acquisitions, and stock prices. That evening, surrounded by polished marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows, she realized she had witnessed something that money could never purchase: integrity. She quietly opened her phone and searched for the business card Marcus had handed the dealership manager before leaving. She looked at his name for several seconds before placing the card carefully inside her notebook instead of her wallet. Somehow, without either of them realizing it, the mystery surrounding the Porsche had already become connected to something much bigger than a hidden electronic device. It had become the beginning of two completely different lives slowly moving toward the same road. The following morning arrived wrapped in cool gray clouds, and Marcus Carter was already unlocking the service bay before sunrise. The familiar scent of motor oil, clean steel, and fresh coffee settled around the garage as he organized his tools with the quiet routine that had shaped his life for years. Nothing about the previous afternoon had changed the way he approached his work. Every wrench returned to the same drawer. Every diagnostic tablet rested on the same charging station. Every customer deserved the same patience, whether they drove a 15-year-old pickup truck or a brand-new luxury sedan. Just after 8 o'clock, a black sedan rolled slowly into the parking lot. Victoria Sinclair stepped out alone, dressed far more simply than the day before. There were no reporters, no assistants, no security team surrounding her. She carried only a slim leather folder and a thoughtful expression that no business magazine had ever captured. Marcus looked up from the vehicle he was inspecting and offered the same polite smile he gave every customer. "Good morning, ma'am." Victoria returned the greeting with a small nod. "Good morning, Marcus. I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" For a moment, she simply looked around the modest garage. The concrete floor showed years of honest work. Family photographs decorated one corner of the office wall. A colorful drawing signed by Ava hung beside an old calendar. Everything reflected a life built carefully instead of quickly. Victoria finally opened the folder and placed it on the workbench. Inside were photographs of the concealed electronic device, engineering reports, and security findings collected overnight. "They confirmed your instincts were correct," she said quietly. "The component was intentionally installed. The investigators believe whoever placed it understood advanced vehicle electronics." Marcus studied the photographs without excitement or pride. "I am glad they found it before anything else happened." Victoria watched him carefully. "You are not surprised." Marcus shook his head gently. "Machines always tell the truth. Eventually. The difficult part is convincing people to listen before they do." Those words settled over the garage with unexpected weight. Victoria lowered her eyes for a moment before speaking again. "I owe you an apology." Marcus looked genuinely confused. "For what?" She smiled faintly, though there was regret behind it. "Yesterday, I judged you before I knew anything about you. I made a joke that was careless, and I underestimated the man standing in front of me." Marcus remained quiet for several seconds before answering. "We all make quick assumptions sometimes. What matters is what we do after we realize we were wrong." The simplicity of his response caught her off guard. There was no bitterness, no attempt to make her feel embarrassed, only grace. Before Victoria could respond, the service office door opened and Ava stepped inside carrying her backpack because school had started an hour later for teacher conferences. She ran toward Marcus with the easy confidence only children possess. "Dad, I forgot my science project." Marcus laughed softly as he reached for the colorful display board waiting safely in his office. "I thought you might." Ava turned toward Victoria and smiled politely. "Hello." Victoria smiled back just as warmly. "Hello, Ava." The little girl thanked her father, hugged him without hesitation, and hurried back toward the waiting school bus. Victoria watched the brief exchange through the front window until the bus disappeared around the corner. She realized that the shocking discovery she had expected to find inside an engineering report had never been hidden inside the Porsche at all. It had been standing in front of her from the very beginning. The greatest strength Marcus Carter possessed was not his remarkable ability to understand machines. It was the quiet integrity with which he chose to live every ordinary day. 3 days passed, and life quietly returned to its familiar rhythm inside Marcus Carter's garage. Customer after customer arrived with ordinary problems, and Marcus greeted each one with the same patience that had earned the trust of his community. The mystery surrounding Victoria Sinclair's Porsche had almost disappeared into the background of his thoughts. He assumed the investigators had everything they needed and that his small role in the story had ended. On Thursday afternoon, however, a black sedan stopped outside the garage once again. This time, Victoria was not carrying engineering reports or security photographs. Instead, she carried a simple cardboard bakery box and 2 cups of fresh coffee. When Marcus looked up from replacing a water pump, she smiled with genuine warmth. "I realized I never thanked you properly," she said. Marcus accepted the coffee with quiet appreciation. "You already did." Victoria shook her head. "No, I thank you for finding the device. I never thank you for reminding me that character still exists in places where the world often forgets to look." Marcus laughed softly. "That sounds much bigger than anything I actually did." Before she could answer, Ava walked into the garage carrying a library book because school had ended early for the day. She immediately noticed the bakery box sitting on the counter. Victoria smiled at the little girl. "I hope chocolate cupcakes are acceptable." Ava's eyes widened. She looked toward her father before touching the box. Marcus nodded. "It is polite to say thank you." "Thank you," Ava said with an excited grin. Victoria knelt beside her. "Your dad tells me you love science." Ava nodded proudly. "I want to build cars that never break down." Marcus chuckled. "She has set a difficult goal." Victoria looked at the child thoughtfully before asking, "Would you like to visit my engineering center someday? We have designers, robotics labs, and testing facilities. I think you would enjoy seeing how ideas become real." Ava looked at her father instead of answering. Marcus smiled. "Only if it fits your schedule after homework." "Homework first," Ava agreed without hesitation. Victoria noticed the exchange and quietly admired the gentle discipline that shaped their relationship. There was no pressure, no performance, only mutual respect. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the open garage door, the 3 of them shared coffee and cupcakes on folding chairs beside the service bay. Customers continued arriving, yet no one hurried the conversation. For the first time in years, Victoria experienced something she rarely found inside executive boardrooms. She was surrounded by people who were completely comfortable being themselves. There were no negotiations, no hidden agendas, no carefully rehearsed conversations. Only simple honesty. Before leaving, Victoria handed Marcus a sealed envelope. "This is not a payment," she said before he could refuse it. "It is an invitation." After she drove away, Marcus opened the envelope and discovered a handwritten letter inviting him to serve as an independent consultant for Sinclair Dynamics on vehicle safety and quality inspections. The position required only a few hours each month and allowed him to keep running his garage. At the bottom of the page, Victoria had added one final sentence in blue ink. "The world already has enough impressive people. It needs more trustworthy ones, and I hope you will help us build something worthy of that trust." 6 months later, the grand opening of Sinclair Dynamics' new Vehicle Safety Innovation Center drew engineers, students, local business owners, and families from across North Carolina. The glass building reflected the clear autumn sky, but the attention of the crowd was focused on something much simpler than the architecture. A modest sign stood beside the entrance reading, "Integrity drives innovation." Victoria Sinclair insisted those words remain the first thing every visitor would see because she knew exactly where the inspiration had come from. Inside the facility, Marcus Carter walked through the engineering lab wearing the same quiet smile he had carried inside his neighborhood garage. He had accepted Victoria's invitation, not to leave the work he loved, but to help improve the safety review process for every vehicle the company designed. He still repaired cars in his own shop every week. He still picked Ava up after school whenever he could. The consulting position had never changed who he was. It had simply given him another way to serve people. Engineers soon discovered that Marcus asked questions no computer could generate because he always thought first about the families. Sitting behind the steering wheel instead of the numbers printed on a specification sheet. His suggestions led to several practical improvements that reduced maintenance costs while making future vehicles easier to inspect and repair. Whenever reporters asked him about the recognition, Marcus always gave the same answer. Good ideas belong to the entire team. Victoria smiled every time she heard those words because she knew they were sincere. On the afternoon of the ceremony, Ava proudly guided a group of visiting middle school students through the education center. She eagerly explained how engineers solved problems and how mechanics helped keep those solutions reliable for years to come. One of the students quietly asked her if her father was famous. Ava thought for a moment before answering with complete confidence. Not everywhere, just where it matters. Victoria happened to overhear the conversation and felt herself smile. She remembered the first afternoon they had met, when she had measured Marcus by his work shirt instead of his character. Looking back, she realized the greatest discovery had never been hidden beneath the hood of a Porsche. It had been hidden inside her own assumptions. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the lights inside the Innovation Center had grown softer, Marcus, Ava, and Victoria stood outside the building watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of gold and orange. A gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass across the courtyard. No photographers remained. No executives waited nearby. There was only quiet conversation and comfortable silence. Victoria looked toward Marcus with a warm smile. "Do you remember the first thing I ever said to you?" Marcus laughed softly. "I remember." She shook her head with playful embarrassment. "I cannot believe those words came out of my mouth." Marcus smiled kindly. "Sometimes people begin with the wrong sentence." Victoria looked toward Ava, who was chasing colorful leaves across the sidewalk with joyful laughter. Then she looked back at Marcus. "I am grateful ours did not end there." Neither of them rushed to define what the future might become. Some stories grow through dramatic moments. Others grow through ordinary days filled with trust, respect, and quiet acts of kindness. As the last rays of sunlight reflected across the glass walls behind them, Marcus watched his daughter laughing without a care in the world. Victoria watched the father who had changed her understanding of success, and the silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt complete.